Well, France Cronje reckons the entry of Jacob Zuma supporting the MK party is a game changer for politics in South Africa. It will give all kinds of ructions within the ANC. But what about everybody else? There's a huge week coming up in by-elections, which will give us a closer picture. Fighting those by-elections in the Western Cape in particular is the Patriotic Alliance. And we are talking to the strategic advisor and co-founder, Charles Cilliers. Charles, it's been a long time since we've actually caught up. 8 months ago, you were celebrating a very famous by-election victory then. You're fighting two big ones this week, and we'll get onto those later. But the real news, I guess, broadly speaking, is the entry of Jacob Zuma against his old party. How are you interpreting this and the impact of this on the election, which we still believe is going to be coming up in May?
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point, Alec. It's good to be back. It's been a while. I can't believe it's been so long. The entry of Jacob Zuma, it's something that we knew this was coming, but I think that it's only really Gayton Mackenzie, the president of the PA, who understood that this was going to be as big as it's become. Me personally, I actually thought this would just be a flap in the wind. But I think people have always underestimated the ground root support that JZ has. And even when we had the riots in KZN, people were saying, oh, it's just situational, people are desperate and it's an excuse. But the man really has a lot of grassroots support. And KZN is going to be a bloodbath for the ANC. I saw the most recent polls were saying that he could get as much as the ANC, around 25%, to either, him and the ANC, leaving that province like it's going to be a mess come coalition time after the elections, right? But he's going to have a big impact in Gauteng, and you add up all of those votes in the provinces where he's strong, he's going to have an impact in Mpumalanga, perhaps Limpopo. You add all of that up, he's going to parliament, his party is going to parliament, and it's going to hurt the ANC. It's definitely going to hurt the EFF as well. Don't think it has that much of an impact on us as the Patriotic Alliance, but I guess all the smaller parties are kind of smacking their lips at the prospect of a more hung national and provincial governmental state come the end of elections.
You've played that card very well thus far. Some people say too well, and that you've helped the ANC to continue to rule in areas where they've kept making a mess of things. What's the strategy of the PA?
I think that we've always played the ball as it bounces. I don't think that there's a strategy to say, oh, let's put the ANC in power wherever. We've always said that we're willing to govern with whoever's willing to govern with us. And it's unfortunately the position and the choice of the DA to alienate us. Of course, if they come on here, they'll say differently. They'll say we're an unreliable partner, and they'll define that in whatever way they want to. But we've always been willing to work with them and with anyone, and we're still willing to work with them. And I think with what's happening in the Western Cape, the DA really needs to introspect and question whether it's the right thing for themselves, for the province, the country, to continue to alienate the PA as much as they do, because they very well may need us in ways that go beyond these municipalities come the end of this year's elections. And they really may need us to continue to govern in the Western Cape. And we're willing to work with anyone, including them, but they have basically called us enemy number one for themselves. But once the dust settles after the May, June, July, maybe even August elections, we don't believe it'll be that late. They may have to reconsider and come back to the negotiating table. And we're willing to work with them. We always have been.
And you remain, despite some pretty hectic allegations against you personally and the party as a whole.
Look, the DA often shoot from the hip. They don't really think. There was a statement that went out from the leader of their caucus in Johannesburg, Belinda Kaiser Eshiozenjoku, making wild allegations against me. And I found that extraordinary because I know the woman in question. I messaged her and said, look, why are you saying these things? They're untrue. They were alleging that I occupied 2 different jobs at the same time, that I was the chairperson of the PA, which I've never been. I've never actually held a formal position in the party. And I actually made a police case against her that's currently being referred for possible prosecution. So, it's nothing personal. I just felt that I have to set the record straight. And you see that with any piece of dirt that they can throw at the PA. They won't even look at it twice. They'll just throw it. So yeah, there's bad blood, but at the end of the day, there's no permanent enemies in politics. And we have to work together for the sake of the country, no matter what the petty differences might be.
Why is it so aggressive towards yourselves? And I'm sure you must have thought about this a lot, given that you have, and Gayton Mackenzie as well, outstretched a hand of reconciliation on numerous occasions, even on BizNews TV. Is this perhaps, from the outside, you would think it could be something to do with the Western Cape, and that you are basically a coloured party in a province which has a majority of coloured people?
I think that's the primary reason, is that the DA's core strength and their growth over the years has been relying on a backbone of majority coloured support. Because if you're just going to rely on white or Indian support, you'll never be able to govern the Western Cape. So that has been the rise of the DA. That's the story that they've been able to build over the years. And unfortunately, I think that it was done on the cynical premise that they are not the ANC and they're an alternative to the ANC, instead of actually positioning themselves as an offering for that group in the Western Cape. And we have emerged as a group that actually has a positive offering for the coloured voter in the Western Cape. And not just, vote for us because we're not the ANC. And we're also not even saying vote for us because we're not the DA. We've always said vote for us because we're the PA. And this is what we have to offer. And we've always said that we're putting the long neglected issues that are actually quite unique to the coloured community at the top of the agenda, but that doesn't mean we're a coloured party. I think what's emerged with us is the saying that we're a colourful party, and we actually welcome people from all walks of life, but we have made it very clear that our core constituency, where what our grassroots support has been and emerged from, is the coloured community. And we're not ashamed to say that there's issues that the coloured community needs to have put on the agenda at the table. And we're going to continue to do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what multi-party democracy is all about. And that's a big threat to the DA, because they are now trying to make up lost ground, trying to make up for all of that lost time, where they could have done more for the people who've given them the most support. And they kind of neglected those people, not even kind of. You see that with these by-elections that we're in right now, that people feel neglected. And then we come along and they say, no, we're going to give you a chance. And I think that's what makes these current by-elections so significant, is that the DA have always tried to dismiss us as, they're just a small party, they're a rural party, they're a coloured party, whatever it is that they're going to say. And we're now in DA heartland, contesting 2 wards here in the Western Cape, Grabo and here in George, that are currently still vacant DA wards. It's 2 DA ward councillors that walked over to the PA. And if those wards switch over, as we're confident they're going to being PA, then no one will be able to say, the PA is not that much of a threat anymore. Because if we can walk in and actually change a ward from DA to PA, then that should prove to people that we are an enormous threat to the DA.
Let's have a look at them in some detail. The one at Theewaterskloof, or near Grabo, in the last election, the DA won very handily, over 51%. And if you add its partners in the charter, it should get to 54% here. ANC 19, PA 12. But from what I'm hearing, it's the person who will be drawing the votes, in your opinion, rather than the party. How confident are you that that 12% is going to be significantly greater? And indeed, how confident are you that you're going to win this ward?
Look, I'm not saying that it's the person. I think the candidate is very important, but I think that the mood on the ground, and I've been here now for a few days, the mood on the ground is that there's a real dissatisfaction with what the DA has been offering people who've been voting for them for a long time in these wards. And for example, in Grabouw, I think the issues there are that it's primarily farms, and people feel that their lives have really not improved, and that the DA is actually standing more with the farmers themselves and not really fighting to do much to change some pretty horrific circumstances on a lot of these farms. And that's why we feel this may be the time that people actually switch and saying, look, let's give another party a chance. And when you look here in George, we're not actually using the DAs or the former DA candidates to stand in this by-election. Basil Petrus was a mayor previously here in George, and he's not standing. And he's going to play a bigger organizing role for us in the province here going forward. But we actually feel even more confident in George about the outcome here than we do in Grabouw. And I think that's because of the resentment that has built up in Parkdean, Ward H here in George, where they just haven't seen enough change. They haven't seen enough improvement in their lives despite years and years and promises from the DA. And we feel it's time for change, and we're going to see that change now.
It's fascinating times. Those by-elections themselves are very interesting. On the other hand, MK is fighting its second by-election since Zuma's not even in a month, and the previous one they got 20%. Are you expecting they will show, given what you discussed earlier, some more gains?
Not too much of an expert on those particular wards, but from what I've picked up and what I've gathered is that as much as they had a very credible showing in the first one, this one that's coming up is going to be even better for them. It's more of a stronghold for Jacob Zuma. So I'm not going to make any predictions because I'm not a pollster or an analyst on that front, but it looks like with every day that passes with MK, the more we learn about them, the fact that this has actually been going on potentially for 4 years, that they've been mobilizing and trying to do this, really does drive home the fact that we're dealing with a much bigger and more well-funded and well-structured and organization in the form of MK than anybody predicted. You know, when this first came out, everyone thought it was a joke. And with every day that passes, we're realizing that we're dealing with an enormously well-orchestrated, effectively, you can almost call it a revolutionary movement, targeted at the ANC. Because we know that what Jacob Zuma is trying to achieve here is to bring what he calls the progressive forces of the left with an ANC background together to create a new groundswell of support for this thing called MK, which he's not really characterizing as distinct from the ANC. He's kind of characterizing this as like the true ANC and a return to the roots of the ANC. And I think his plan is that once this thing has been established and they've got political power, that he's going to try to probably re-amalgamate or force the ANC back to what he believes and what people who are aligned with him believe the ANC should be. So it's something new, something that's never been seen before in our politics, and it is shaking the firmaments. So I'm very curious to see how this next by-election is going to go. I think they're proving their mettle now, because at the end of the day, you can say a lot, but it's only election results that prove what you're made of. And that's why we do these by-elections as the PA. I think that's why Zuma and his team are doing these by-elections to show that they mean business.
Charles, let's fast forward to the 22nd of May, which does still look like the most likely election date. How are you seeing, first of all, yourselves, the PA, performing then, and then other smaller parties that are making a lot of noise, but the pollsters are giving no chance? Roger Jardine's operation, for instance, Songezi Zibi's, Musi Maimani's, Boza, Action SA. Are the pollsters getting this completely wrong?
Yeah, look, I think we are preparing for the election a week later than that, 29th. There's a few things that have pointed us towards that, but we're ready to go to elections anytime. I agree with you that the ANC in particular and the ANC government is pushing really hard to avoid an election in the depths of winter, especially with load shedding. And there's a number of other factors. So May definitely looks like it's on the cards. And then as for the prospects of all of these new players and slightly more established players on the call it the smaller party side, I don't think that the pollsters are completely at sea with this, but there may be a lot of factors here that are muddying the waters and obscuring the true picture of what may be going on here. And I think there's a lot of people that are saying that they'd prefer not to say who they're going to vote for. When you look at any of these polls, there's a big fraction of that going on. But I do think that previous experience has shown us that people who say they don't know who they're going to vote for, they're not going to vote for the ANC. Time after time, it comes out that those are not ANC voters. So I think those are people who may be weighing their options. They may not feel confident enough to say who it is exactly they want to vote for. But I think those are voters that were either never ANC voters to begin with, or they're lost to the ANC. I do think that, as you said, the emergence of MK changes things. It changes things, I think, for the IFP. It changes things for EFF. Doesn't really change things too much for the likes of your Roger Jardines, your Rise Mzansi's, us, Action SA. But I do think that Action SA may have peaked a little earlier than they may have liked. The experience they've had of being in local government, I think, has been very sobering, at times, I think, traumatic for them. I think Rise Mzansi has some interesting ideas. It's a very cerebral party. I'm not sure if they have enough grassroots support and enough of a constituency, because I think that in South Africa, politics is constituency based, and you have to grow those constituencies if you want to be at the table. It's very difficult to appeal to people just on a purely intellectual level and try to convince them that, you've got the best brains trust in the room. And similarly, I think that's an issue that Roger Jardine and Change Starts Now is going to face, is the hard work of warm bodies and constituencies is what gets you somewhere in South Africa. So I think that the new players have their work cut out for them. I do think that they're going to do a little better than the pollsters are predicting. But I also think this multi-party coalition that what started as the Moonshot Pact, it's very unlikely that they're going to get to that 50%. We were willing to join that, but the DA, for reasons that I'm sure they can explain to you, they don't want to work with us. But at the end of the day, what counts is the votes, and not what was signed before the election. It's what happens afterwards. So we'll tally up what we all get. As for what we believe we're going to get as the PA, I've always said personally that if I'll dance on the rooftops if we get above 3%, right? And there's others in the party that are much more confident of getting upwards of 7 to 10%, right? And I don't know what I would do if we got to that, right? But if you look at our growth, and particularly in the Western Cape, the party has now moved towards actually we don't have to push so hard anymore. We are going to places and finding that people have built structures, people understand the culture of the PA, people we've never even met or signed up, that it's actually becoming a bit of a snowball now. And that is a development that we've been pushing for as the PA. And that's actually starting to happen now where they always say culture will beat strategy, right? And it's the culture of the PA that's now really dominating, and people actually want to be part of this movement because they identify with it so strongly. And it's actually now transcending just the people that have been there all along. And we're finding that the PA is waiting for us where we go, and we don't have to actually plant the seeds anymore. It's getting there on its own. Very exciting for us.
I'm sure it is, but the headlines have been about two issues, which I'd be interested to hear whether they've helped or hurt you. The one, the support of Israel, which has been diametrically opposed to what the ANC government has been doing. And the second one is the headlines around the expulsion of illegal immigrants.
Yeah. So sorry, what's the question actually, Alec?
Well, that's the question. Has it helped or hurt you, those two issues?
Look, I think that it's a cost benefit, really. You're never going to please everyone when it comes to that particular issue, right? So I think the party's been very clear that we are not picking sides in the conflict in the Middle East, and particularly the Palestine issue. What we're saying is that we believe in a two-state solution, but we were very clear from day one, from October 7 onwards, that we don't believe that Hamas's approach of crossing from the Gaza Strip into Israel and murdering innocent civilians and taking hostages, we didn't believe that that's the right thing to do. We don't support that. We are calling it what it is. It's terrorism, right? And whatever your views may be of the history of Palestine and Israel, we are never going to support behavior like that. Now, we are saying we're supporting peace, and we're saying that a two-state solution needs to be the way to go there. So, in as much as supporting Israel is saying we support Israel's right to statehood and the right to exist, which does not sit well with the ANC. Because if you look at what the ANC is supporting, they may not actually admit that to themselves, but they're effectively supporting the destruction of Israel and the removal of every single Jewish person from that territory, which we are saying is anti-Semitic, and we're saying that that's wrong. That would in fact be a true genocide, right? And we could never get behind a strategy that has the long-term outcome of the genocide once again of the Jewish people. That is our position on it. And Gayton has made it clear that it's a position that's informed both by politics and history, but also by religious belief. And we find that quite a lot of people that support the PA are Christian. And that also promotes the idea that you should be supporting Israel. Now, we can debate that till the cows come home, but I think that's the reality for us. And that a lot of the churches that we go to, we actually have a lot of people coming to us and saying, thank you for standing with Israel. So I don't think that it's actually harming the PA. I think we're getting a lot of respect for it because we've taken a position that is principled and spiritual, right? Which is kind of a very South African mix. And then as for the issue with the illegal immigrants, I think that when you're on the ground and you see the reality of the lived experience of people on the borders of true poverty, you see the impact that our open borders and the rampant illegal migration, right? You see it in Johannesburg, where I live and work. We see the impact of that. I'm in the inner city quite often, and I see these hijacked buildings and I see the conditions. But we see it here even, in any informal settlement, is that the people at the coalface of this migration pressure, they're suffering. And they need government to actually take people back to where they come from. And that's why we're saying as the PA that we have to do mass deportations. Because the situation for poor people is unbearable. And if you're middle class or upper class, you don't feel that affected by it. But we can't speak for those people. We have to speak for the majority of people who feel that this is a crisis, and it is a crisis.
Charles Cilliers from the Patriotic Alliance, and I'm Alec Hogg from BizNews.com.